10 years, that's how long Nora carried it. And then, in a crowd of total strangers, she saw a face she'd know anywhere. Her heart just stopped. Back then, they were inseparable. 2 kids, 1 bracelet, 1 promise. Best friends forever, Mia said. And Nora believed her. I mean, why wouldn't she? Then one afternoon, everything changed. A car Nora didn't recognize pulled away from the curb. Mia was inside. She pressed her hand to the window, and then she was gone. Nora told everyone what she saw. The grown-ups just smiled. They moved away, sweetie. But Nora knew better. Something about that whole day was wrong. Years went by. Nora grew up. New city, new school, a whole new life. But she never took off that bracelet, and she never let go of her promise. Now she's 20, standing outside a door she was never meant to find. The bracelet still on her wrist. And Mia's on the other side. 10 years. That's how long Nora had been waiting without even knowing it. Just a normal Tuesday. Books in her bag, coffee going cold. And then she froze. Right there in the middle of the crowd. Because a face went by. A face she'd know anywhere. Older now, sure. But those eyes? Same. Her heart just dropped. Could it really be her after all this time? Back in her room, Nora pulled out an old photo. The 2 of them, age 10, grinning like idiots. And there, on both their wrists, the same little bracelet. She still wore hers every single day. Honestly, she'd never taken it off. Her hands were shaking now. Because if that really was Mia she'd seen today, then everything she'd been told as a kid was a lie. And she had to know the truth. Let's go back. 10 years to be exact. Nora and Mia were the kind of best friends you only get once. Next-door neighbors, same class, same everything. They built blanket forts, stayed up way too late, told each other every little secret. You know how some kids just click? That was them, inseparable. And neither of them had any idea how little time they had left together. One summer afternoon, Nora made 2 bracelets, one for her, one for Mia, red and teal, with a tiny silver elephant. So we never forget each other, she said. Mia laughed and held out her wrist. Best friends forever, right? Forever, Nora promised. Just 2 kids and a piece of string. But that promise, it would end up meaning more than either of them could imagine. That last good day, they shared an ice cream in the park. Split it right down the middle, like always. Mia was quiet, though. Kind of off. Nora asked what was wrong, and Mia just shrugged. Said her family had some stuff going on. Nothing more. Looking back, Nora would replay that moment 1,000 times. The little sign she missed. Because the very next week, Mia was gone. It happened fast. One afternoon, a car Nora didn't recognize pulled up next door, and Mia was inside it. She had her hand pressed to the window, looking back at the only home she'd ever known. No goodbye. No wave. Just gone. Nora ran outside the second she heard the engine. But all she caught were the taillights, turning the corner. And just like that, her best friend disappeared. For days, Nora kept going back to that empty house. Standing at the gate, waiting, like maybe Mia would just show up again. The curtains were gone. The yard was bare. It was like nobody had ever lived there at all. And the weirdest part? The grown-ups acted like it was no big deal. People move, sweetie. But Nora knew her friend. Mia would never leave without saying goodbye. Nora tried to tell them. The car. The woman she'd never seen before. The way Mia looked back. But every adult just gave her that same tired smile. They moved away, honey. That's all. Pat on the shoulder. End of conversation. Can you imagine? Being 10 years old, knowing something's wrong, and nobody, not one single person, will listen. So Nora stopped talking about it. But she never stopped wondering. That night, Nora opened her notebook, and in big, careful letters, she wrote 4 words. I will find you. She underlined it twice. Then she touched the little bracelet on her wrist and made herself a promise. Someday, somehow, she'd figure out what really happened to Mia. She was just a kid. No clues, no help, no idea where to start. But she meant every word, and she'd carry it for 10 long years. And the years went by. Nora grew up. New town, new school, college, a whole new life. The bracelet faded a little, but she never took it off. Most days, she didn't even think about that promise anymore. It just lived somewhere in the back of her mind. Quiet. Waiting. And then came that Tuesday on campus. The face in the crowd. 10 years of waiting, and suddenly, everything came rushing back. For the next 3 days, Nora barely went to class. I mean, how could she? She kept going back to the same spot on campus, the exact place she'd seen that face. Same time of day, same crowd, just watching, waiting, hoping, and nothing. Hundreds of strangers walked by, and not one of them was her. But here's the thing about Nora. She doesn't let go, never has. You give that girl a loose thread, she's going to pull it until the whole thing unravels. So she started thinking it through. If that really was Mia, and her gut said it was, then Mia was probably a student here too, which meant there'd be a record, a name, something. The trouble was, Nora didn't even know what last name to look for anymore. Because the family that took Mia all those years ago, she had no idea who they really were, or what they'd called her since. She sat down on a bench, pulled out her phone, and stared at that old photo again, the one we still couldn't see. And she whispered something to herself. Okay, where do I even start? It felt impossible. One face in a school of thousands. But Nora had waited 10 years for this. A few more days wouldn't stop her now. That night, Nora hit the library. And she didn't just browse, she dug. She started with the student directory, scrolled through every face she could find. No luck. Then she tried a different angle. She typed in the old street where Mia used to live, looking for anything. Old news, property records, you name it. And that's when she found the first weird thing. The house next door, Mia's house, had been sold 10 years ago. Fast, way below market value. Almost like somebody wanted to get rid of it quick and disappear. No forwarding address, nothing. Nora frowned at the screen. Why would a family that was just moving away practically give their house away overnight? She kept going. Pulled up old school yearbooks from back home, found their 4th grade class photo. And there they were, 2 little girls, front row, grinning. She zoomed in on Mia's face. Then she zoomed in on the woman standing at the edge of the photo. A teacher's aide, the caption said. Nora's stomach turned, because she recognized that woman. Same tight bun, same cold eyes. It was the woman from the car, the one who took Mia. So this stranger hadn't just shown up out of nowhere that day. She'd been around for a while, watching, and nobody noticed. Except, of course, a 10-year-old kid who never forgot a face. So now Nora couldn't stop. One link, then another, then another. Around 2 in the morning, she found it. Old local news article. Tiny, buried, kind of thing nobody clicks. The headline was about a custody dispute over a decade back now. A little girl, taken from her relatives during some messy family thing. No names. She was a minor. But the dates lined up. The town, too. All of it. Hand flew to her mouth. The story everyone told her growing up was simple. Mia's family moved away. Clean, easy, done. But this said something else entirely. Said Mia never moved at all. She'd been taken by someone who had no right to. And the adults back home, they either didn't know, or they did and looked the other way. Nora couldn't decide which was worse. Sat back in her chair, heart pounding. 10 years of people telling her she was just a confused little kid making things up. And here it was, black and white. She'd been right the whole time. Being right came with a new problem, though. If Mia really had been taken and was somehow here, now, on this campus, then whoever took her was probably still close, still watching. And Nora was about to start asking the kind of questions somebody really didn't want asked. 2 days later, Nora finally found her. Crossing the courtyard, books in her arms. Older, taller, hair a little different, but it was her. No question. Nora's whole body went cold and hot at the same time. 10 years. And here she was, 20 feet away. So Nora did the only thing she could think of. She walked right up and said her name. Mia? The girl stopped, turned, and just stared. Polite but blank. Sorry, do I know you? Oof, that one hurt. But Nora kept going. She talked about the old neighborhood, the blanket forts, the ice cream they always split down the middle. And the whole time, the girl just shook her head, looking more and more uncomfortable. I think you've got the wrong person. But here's what Nora noticed. When she mentioned the bracelet, the little elephant charm, something flickered just for a second. The girl's eyes dropped to Nora's wrist, and her face changed, like a memory trying to surface from somewhere deep. Then, just as fast, a wall came back up. I really have to go, she said, and hurried off. Nora stood there, heart racing. Because that reaction, that wasn't wrong person. That was someone who'd been told for years not to remember. And Nora had just cracked the first tiny hole in that wall. Now, what Nora didn't know yet was what was happening on the other side of all that. Because Mia walked away from that courtyard shaken. More than she let on. She'd spent years being told a very specific story about who she was and where she came from. And most of the time, she believed it. You kind of have to, right? When it's the only story you've got. But that bracelet, that little silver elephant, it poked at something. A flash of a sunny porch. A friend with a red hoodie. A feeling more than a memory, really. Warm, safe, and gone. She'd had these flashes before, over the years. Always pushed them down. The woman who raised her, the one with the cold eyes, had a way of shutting those questions down. Fast. Don't be silly. That never happened. You always had such an imagination. So Mia had learned. Don't ask. Don't dig. Don't rock the boat. But now some girl on campus knew her name. Her real name. And things about her childhood that nobody should know. Things even Mia barely remembered. She told herself to forget it. Just a weird coincidence. But that night, lying awake, she kept seeing that bracelet. And for the first time in years, Mia let herself ask the question she'd buried so deep. What if the story she'd been told wasn't true? 2 days after that, the woman found Nora. Nora was walking back to her dorm when a voice stopped her cold. You've been asking a lot of questions. She turned around, and there she was. The woman from the car, the cold eyes, the tight bun. 10 years older, but unmistakable. Up close, she was calm, almost pleasant. which somehow made it scarier. She told Nora, real quiet, that she should focus on her own life, her own studies, that some things are better left in the past, that stirring up old stories only ends up hurting people. It wasn't yelling. There was no scene. But every word landed like a warning. And Nora understood exactly what was happening. This woman knew Nora was getting close, and she'd come to make her back off. Now, most people would have backed off. Honestly, that's the smart move. But the woman made one big mistake. She looked down at Nora's wrist, at the bracelet, and for just a flicker, her composure cracked. Recognition, fear even, and that told Nora everything. This woman knew exactly what that bracelet meant, which meant she knew exactly who Mia really was. So instead of scaring Nora off, she just confirmed it. Nora wasn't chasing a coincidence. She was chasing the truth. And she was getting close enough to scare the one person who'd spent 10 years hiding it. Nora didn't sleep much that night. Who would? Let's be real. A grown adult had just tracked her down and warned her off. That's frightening. Part of her wanted to drop the whole thing. Go back to normal classes, normal life. Pretend she'd never seen that face in the crowd. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, turning the bracelet over and over on her wrist, thinking about that scared little 10-year-old who nobody believed. The one who wrote 4 words in a notebook and underlined them twice. I will find you. And she realized something. If she walked away now, she wouldn't just be giving up on the truth. She'd be doing the exact same thing every adult had done to her 10 years ago. Looking away. Staying quiet. Letting it slide because it was easier. No, not happening. But she also knew she couldn't be reckless. This wasn't a game, and she was up against someone who clearly had practiced keeping secrets. She needed proof. Real, solid proof. Something nobody could wave away or call a kid's imagination. So she made a plan. She'd go back to that old news story, track down the relatives mentioned in it, Mia's actual family, the ones who lost her. If anyone deserved to know Mia might be alive and close, it was them. She wiped her eyes, sat up straight, and opened her laptop. Scared? Sure. Stopping? Not a chance. Took Nora almost a week of digging. Phone calls, dead ends, polite, sorry, can't help you, after polite, sorry, can't help you. But she got a name, then a number. Mia's grandmother. Her hands were actually shaking when she dialed. What do you even say? Hi, you don't know me, but I think your granddaughter's alive and going to my college. No easy way in. So she just told the truth. Gently. Careful. Explained who she was, the old neighborhood, the friendship. The day Mia disappeared. Long silence on the other end. Long. And then the old woman started to cry. Turns out the family never stopped looking. Not one single day. Years and pretty much everything they had spent trying to find Mia. The woman who took her kept moving, town after town, always one step ahead, always a new name. Eventually, the trail just went cold, left them with nothing but a photo and a hole where she used to be. And now here was this stranger on the phone, 20 years old, saying the words they'd almost given up hoping to hear. She might be okay. She might be close. Before they hung up, the grandmother said something that stuck. We never stopped believing she was out there. And Nora thought, yeah, me neither. Meanwhile, Mia was unraveling a thread of her own. After that day in the courtyard, she couldn't let it go. That girl knew too much. The bracelet, the porch, the ice cream. These weren't things a stranger could guess. So Mia did something she'd never dared to do before. She went looking through the woman's things. Way in the back of a closet, in a box she wasn't supposed to touch, she found stuff that didn't add up. Old documents with names she didn't recognize, a few addresses in towns she'd never heard of, and a child's drawing, 2 little girls holding hands, one in a red hoodie. On the back, in a kid's handwriting, "Me and Mia, best friends." But the thing was, Mia didn't remember drawing it. Her heart started pounding, because none of this fit the story she'd been told her whole life. The woman always said it had just been the 2 of them. No other family, no old friends, nothing before. So why was there a box full of before? For the first time, Mia let herself really look at the woman who raised her. The cold way she answered questions, the constant moving, the way she always seemed to be watching the door. And a terrible thought crept in. What if that girl on campus wasn't crazy? What if she was the only one telling the truth? Mia held the drawing to her chest. And she knew. She had to find that girl again. And then, the 2 of them found each other at exactly the same moment. Nora had been on her way to look for Mia. Phone full of proof, the news story, the call with the grandmother, all of it. And Mia had been searching for Nora, clutching that old drawing. They nearly collided in a quiet stairwell. Both stopped. Both just stood there, breathing hard. For a second, nobody said anything. Then Mia spoke first, voice barely above a whisper. "How did you know about the bracelet?" So Nora told her everything. About being 10 years old and watching that car drive away. About nobody believing her. About the promise in the notebook. And then, gently, about what she'd found. The article. The grandmother who never stopped looking. The family that had been waiting 10 whole years. And Mia. Mia just broke. Years of buried questions, all crashing in at once. The story she'd been raised on was falling apart right in front of her. "She told me they didn't want me," Mia said, tears streaming. "She said I had nobody." "She lied," Nora said softly. "You have a whole family, and they never gave up on you." It was almost too much to take in. 2 girls in a stairwell, 10 years and 1,000 miles of lies between them, finally standing on the same side of the truth. But they both knew. Finding out the truth was only half the battle. Now they had to do something about it. So they were a team now. Funny how quick that came about. A decade of nothing, and then bam! One day they're wedged into the back corner of a little cafe, leaning in close, sorting out what came next. And honestly, feelings everywhere. Mia couldn't hold steady, bought into it 1 second. The doubt came creeping right after. What if she's not who I think? She raised me, fed me, she was there. Nora got that. No switch you can flip on the only parent you ever had. But the proof kept piling up. Nora laid it all out on the table. The old news article, notes from the grandmother, the dates, the names, the towns that kept changing, and Mia's own drawing, the one she found in that box she wasn't supposed to open. Piece by piece, the real story came together. And it was uglier than either of them wanted it to be. Here's the thing, though. They couldn't just go to the woman and confront her. Nora knew that. People who've spent 10 years hiding something don't suddenly come clean because you ask nicely. No. They needed to do this right. So they made a plan. Step 1, get Mia somewhere safe, away from the woman, just for a bit. Step 2, bring in the people who actually had the power to fix this. The grandmother, and the proper authorities who could look into it all. Mia was scared. Of course she was. And if it all falls apart, she asked. Nora reached over and tapped the little elephant on her own wrist. Then at least you'll know the truth. And you won't be doing it alone. Not this time. Mia looked at that bracelet for a long moment. And slowly, she nodded. The hardest part came next. The phone call. Nora had already talked to the grandmother. But Mia hadn't heard that voice since she was 10. Maybe younger. She didn't even know if she'd remember it. They set it up for a quiet evening. Mia sat on the edge of Nora's bed, phone in her hand, just staring at the number. Frozen. I can't, she whispered. What do I even say? Nora sat down beside her. Didn't push. Just said, you don't have to say anything perfect. Just say hi. So Mia dialed. It rang twice. And then, this small, shaky old voice. Hello? Mia opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She tried again. Hi, I think I'm... And the grandmother just knew. Somehow, instantly, she knew. Mia? She breathed. Is that you? Is that really you, sweetheart? And that did it. Mia broke down completely. For the next hour, they just talked. Cried, mostly. The grandmother told her things she'd never heard. About her real parents. About the night she was taken. About birthdays they'd kept celebrating even when she wasn't there to blow out the candles. There was a stocking with her name on it, the woman said. Still hung up every winter, just in case. Mia could barely speak through the tears. Years of being told nobody wanted her. Nobody was looking. That she had no one. All of it. Lies. The whole time there'd been a family aching for her. Keeping her chair at the table. Keeping the light on. Nora sat quietly in the corner, wiping her own eyes. She didn't say a word. Didn't need to. This wasn't her moment. It was Mia's. The one she'd been working toward for 10 long years. But the woman wasn't stupid. She could feel something shifting. Mia had always been easy to control. Quiet, obedient, didn't ask questions. But lately, she was different, distant, locking her door, coming home late. And the woman noticed every bit of it. One evening, she cornered Mia in the hallway. Same calm voice she always used, the one that somehow made the air feel heavier. You've been acting strange, she said. Is something going on? Mia's heart was hammering. But she'd promised Nora she'd keep it together. Just a little longer. So she shrugged, said she was tired, exams. The woman didn't buy it? Not really. She stepped closer, started talking about loyalty, about how, after everything she'd done, everything she'd given up for Mia, it would be such a shame if Mia let some stranger fill her head with lies. People will tell you all kinds of stories, she said softly. But I'm the one who was always here. And you know what? A week ago, that might have worked. That guilt, that fear, it was the same leash she'd used for 10 years. But not now. Because now Mia knew. She'd heard her grandmother's voice. She'd seen the proof with her own eyes. So she just looked at the woman, really looked, maybe for the first time. And she said, quiet but steady, I'm going to bed. Then she turned and walked away. Small thing, really. But for Mia, huge. First time in her life she'd ever said no to that woman. And as she shut her door, hands shaking, she texted Nora 3 words. It's time. Tomorrow. The next morning, they moved. Nothing dramatic, no big scene. Just Mia, a small bag, and Nora waiting outside at sunrise. That was the plan. Keep it calm, keep it quiet. Get Mia somewhere safe before anyone noticed. Mia had barely slept. Kept looking over her shoulder the whole walk. But Nora stayed right beside her. Almost there, she kept saying. You're okay. I've got you. They went straight to someone who could actually help. See, Nora hadn't just gathered proof and hoped for the best. She'd done it properly. She'd already been in touch with the right people, folks who handle exactly these kinds of situations. The grandmother had been working her end too, with the authorities back home. So by the time Mia walked through that door, there were people ready. People whose whole job was to sort out the truth and protect the person caught in the middle. And for the first time, Mia got to just sit down and tell her story, all of it. The constant moving, the locked away boxes, the version of her life that never quite added up. And the grown-ups in that room? They listened, really listened, wrote it all down, took it seriously. Can you imagine what that meant to her? After a childhood of being told what to think, what to remember, who she was, somebody finally asked her and believed her. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. There'd be a lot of grown-up steps ahead. Checks, conversations, things that take time. But the scariest part was behind her now. Mia was out. She was safe, and she wasn't carrying it alone anymore. Nora waited the whole time in the hallway, just so Mia would know she was there. And the woman? Well, things finally caught up with her. Once Mia's story was out there, backed up by the grandmother, the old records, all of Nora's digging, the people in charge started asking the questions she'd dodged for a decade. And this time, there was nowhere left to run. No new town to slip away to. No new name to hide behind. Turns out the whole thing went way back. A bitter family fallout, years and years ago. And in the middle of it all, she'd taken Mia, a child who was never hers to take, and just vanished. Built a fake little life out of half-truths and constant moving. Told a scared kid she had no one, so the kid would never go looking. Sitting there now, all that careful control was gone. No cold stare, no smooth voice. Just a person who'd finally been caught. And here's the part Nora thought about a lot afterward. The woman wasn't some cartoon villain. In her own twisted way, she probably told herself she loved Mia, that she was protecting her. People are good at that, making their worst choices sound noble in their own heads. But love doesn't lie to you for 10 years. Love doesn't cut you off from everyone who ever cared about you. Whatever that was, it wasn't love. It was control. And control always cracks eventually. The proper authorities took it from there. It wasn't Nora's job to decide what happened next, and she didn't want it to be. She just wanted the truth out in the open, where nobody could bury it again. And finally, it was. A few weeks later came the day Mia never thought she'd see. The day she'd meet her family, her real family. She was a wreck, honestly. Good wreck, but still. She changed her outfit like 4 times, paced the room, kept asking Nora the same questions. What if they're disappointed? What if I'm not who they remember? What if it's awkward? Nora just smiled. Mia, they've been waiting 10 years. Trust me, awkward is not going to be a problem. The grandmother was flying in. So were Mia's parents, the ones she'd been told didn't want her. The ones who, it turned out, had never stopped searching. Never moved out of the old house, actually. Just in case she ever found her way back. While they waited, Mia turned to Nora and did something unexpected. She held out the bracelet, the original one. The little elephant, faded now, but still holding together after all these years. You kept yours this whole time, Mia said. I want to wear mine again, for today. Her hands were shaking too much to tie it. So Nora did it for her. Same as that summer afternoon 10 years ago. Full circle. You know none of this happens without you, Mia said quietly. Nobody believed me. Nobody believed you either back then. But you never let it go. Nora's eyes filled up. I made you a promise, she said. Took me a while, but I keep my promises. Then they heard it. The car pulling up outside, doors opening, footsteps. And Mia froze, hand over her mouth, staring at the door. 10 years of waiting. And it all came down to the next 30 seconds. The door opened, and then, well, there aren't really words for it. But let's try. An older woman stepped in first. Gray hair, soft face, eyes already overflowing. The grandmother. She took one look at Mia and just stopped, hand over her heart, like she was scared Mia might vanish if she moved too fast. There you are, she whispered. There you are. And then they were across the room and wrapped around each other, both sobbing, holding on like they were making up for every single missed hug at once. 10 years worth, all in one. Right behind her, Mia's parents. The mom couldn't even speak, just kept touching Mia's face, her hair, like she had to make sure she was real. The dad, this big, quiet guy, was crying harder than anyone. They folded Mia into the middle of them, this whole tangle of arms and tears and 10 years of waiting finally breaking loose. Mia kept saying, I'm sorry. For what? She didn't even know. And her mom kept saying, No, 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 you've got nothing to be sorry for. We found you. We finally found you. And off to the side, leaning against the wall, Nora watched, tears just rolling. She wasn't part of the hug, and that was exactly right. This was the family she'd put back together, getting to be a family again. At one point, Mia reached out an arm without letting go of her mom, pulled Nora in. She's part of this too, Mia said. She's the reason. And the grandmother took Nora's face in both hands and just said, Thank you. Thank you for not forgetting her. Honestly, best thing anyone's ever said to her. After all the tears and the hugging, things got quiet. The good kind. Mia and Nora ended up on the steps outside, just the two of them, watching the sun go down. 20 now, not 10. A whole decade sitting between them, only just starting to fill in. At some point, Mia got serious. If you'd walked past that day, if you hadn't recognized me, I'd still be living that lie. Nora shook her head, but I didn't walk past. And some part of you knew too. You came looking for me, remember? Mia looked down at the two bracelets, one on each wrist. Best friends forever. We were kids, no idea we actually meant it. Speak for yourself, Nora laughed. I meant it. And this time, they really were going to get that forever. Things didn't magically fix overnight. Real life doesn't work like that. Hard days mixed in with the good ones. But Mia got to relearn her whole story. The real version. Little things too, like how her mom hums when she cooks, exactly the way Mia always did, without knowing why. She moved back home, into the house they'd never sold. Her old room kept almost the same. There was even that stocking with her name on it. She held it a long time the first night. Didn't say much. Didn't have to. They were patient with her. Gentle. Let her take her time. And slowly, it just started to feel like home. Because that's what it was. For the first time she could remember, Mia knew exactly where she belonged. And Nora, back to regular life. Classes, coffee gone cold. From outside, nothing much had changed. Inside, though, everything. 10 years she'd carried this quiet weight, a promise she wasn't even sure she could keep. And now, finally, she could put it down. Mia was safe. Mia was home. She still catches herself touching the bracelet. Old habit. Worn thin now, but hanging on. Bit like the promise it stood for. Here's what stuck with her. Sometimes the people who need someone in their corner don't have a voice loud enough to carry. And it takes one stubborn person who won't look away to change everything. So that gut feeling, when you know something isn't right, don't ignore it. You never know whose whole world is waiting on the other side. Mia found her way home. Started with a girl who refused to forget.